Hello, my name is Marvin Rappaport, and I am a trustee on the board of trustees at the Ethelbert B. Crawford Public Library in Monticello, New York. We are doing an oral history of the Catskills, as we came to call it, more also known as the Borscht Belt, through the auspices of StoryCorps, which is a federal program to encourage communities to tell their stories. The Catskills and the Borscht Belt is a unique history, and we are interviewing individuals who have lived, worked, and played here in the Catskills for their stories, and also to learn a little bit about how the Catskills has changed over the past several decades. Sure. Today we're going to talk to Kevin Hall, who grew up here in Monticello and whose family worked at one of the more prominent hotels, in fact maybe among the most prominent, and that was the Concorde. And we'd like to welcome Kevin to our microphone and to our program, and ask you first, Kevin, if you could say hello and tell us a little bit about how you and your family came to the Catskills.
Okay, very good. Thank you for interviewing me, Marvin. It's a privilege and honor to be interviewed today. Well, I was born here in Monticello in 1954 at the Monticello Hospital. But prior to that, my mom was originally from Jamaica, Queens, and she came up to this area looking for work. Originally, my mom, as a child, used to come up to the hotels and the Caja Lanes and bungalow colonies with her family up in the Ellenville area, and loved this area so much that she had made up her mind that when she was older, that she would come up and settle in this area. As far as my dad is concerned, my dad was from Albany, New York, and he was a trumpet player, and he too was looking for work. So he came down to the Catskills because at the time in the mid-50s, the Catskills was very busy, and it was a happening place. There was work, activity, jobs, and a lot of excitement in this area, and this was the place to be. So
you were one of those who had both parents in the hotel business, as we call it.
Yes.
And in fact, working at the very same hotel.
Yes, they actually met at the Concord Hotel in 1953 and fell in love and married in 53.
Right. You were born the following year.
Yes.
So what do you remember as an infant in your early days about the hotel? I assume you spent a lot of time there.
Yes, I did. Great question. My mom and dad used to take me to the Concorde when I was 5 or 6 years old for New Year's Eve. That was always a big deal at the Concord Hotel. And I just enjoyed it. That was our life. The hotel was really our life.
You went to school here in Monticello?
Went to school here.
Or in Kiamiah? No. You lived in Monticello.
Yeah, I did. Actually, well, I should say when my parents first married, they lived at Klein's Bungalow Colony down in Kiamiah Lake, right. Which is still there.
The Anawanna Lake Road.
Exactly, right, mm-hmm. Near the new Walmart store, I believe. Yes. Mm-hmm. And about a year or two after that, they purchased a house in a new housing development along Park Avenue.
Felberg?
Yes.
Felberg Estates?
The Felberg Estates. Mm-hmm. And that's where I grew up, on Park Avenue, and it was a great place to grow up. Lots of friends, real Jewish neighborhood. All my friends were mostly Jewish. It was, and a great area to grow up in.
What about the time you spent at the hotel as a young person? Did you go to the day camp?
Yeah, no, I didn't really go to the day camp, but my mom and dad would take me ice skating to the swimming pool there, and sneak me into the dining room where the food was just magnificent. The courses were huge. My mom happened to work for Gordon Winarick, who was the director of the food service at the Concord Hotel, there was a lot of pressure involved in her job, and she only worked there for 8 years, and then she moved on to another business called Bill Bart Associates, which produced colored brochures for many of the hotels and motels and bungalow colonies in this area.
Right.
But my dad remained working as a trumpet player at the hotel, and he also played in the Latin American band in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
The music then was very popular.
For those who don't know, the hotel had a band.
They did.
Or in effect an orchestra that
They
played
did.
for the acts that came, the singers, the dancers.
Yes.
And then in the late 50s, early 60s, when
Yes.
Latin music was the rage,
Yes.
they added a second band. There was a Latin trio or a Latin
Yeah,
band.
my
they
dad was
played-
part of that band.
They played
Yeah.
at the pool, or they
Yes.
played in the afternoon outside, or they played at the early part of the show and
Yes.
didn't as well. So your dad did double duty.
Yeah, my dad played with the Sonny Rossi band that played the Latin American music, and then sometimes he'd sit in with the show band. Marty Beck was the band leader for that big band.
Right.
And
Give us a sense,
yeah.
for those who don't know, what
Sure.
the Concorde nightclub looked like. I guess
Hu-
originally the
huge.
Cordelian Room
Yeah.
and then the Imperial
Huge,
Room.
amazing. It could seat a capacity of over 3,000 people. It's something you've never seen in your life. The stage was huge. If the audience liked your performance, afterwards they would knock with their knockers on the tables. If they didn't like your performance, some would walk out in the middle of your performance and run to the coffee shop for
Right.
refreshments.
Right.
You know, the audience there wasn't bashful. Either they liked you or they didn't like you, and they let it be known.
What were some of the acts
Yeah,
that
that's
you
a
saw
great
or that
question,
during the
Marvin.
time?
That's a great question. I was privileged or lucky enough to see such performers as Milton Berle, and my dad was nice enough to bring me backstage to meet him after his performance one night. What a gentleman. David Brenner, was a regular performer there in the 70s, very funny guy. Red Buttons, Red Skeleton. In fact, I worked at the Concord Hotel as I was older in my teens, making money for college, and as a bellhop there one summer, I had the pleasure, honor, call it what you will, of checking in Red Buttons. Couldn't have been more than a gentleman, sweet, lovely guy. He gave me a $20 tip. I'll never forget that. $20 was a lot in the mid '70s. I schlepped up a bunch of trunks to his room, but couldn't have been a nicer, sweeter man. Pleasure to meet.
How about singing? Was Judy Garland there one of the times that you were there?
Didn't perform. I had not seen her perform there. Other people who were regulars there were like Stephen Eady, Toady Fields, Joan Rivers on occasion. Let's see.
For our listeners,
Yes.
the entertainment was virtually every night.
Yes,
was a
it
show on
was
Saturday.
every night. Yes,
There was a headliner on Saturday night.
Right.
But there might have been a music extravaganza on Sunday, a mambo
Correct.
night on Monday, some other event on Tuesday, another show on Wednesday. Thursday
Right.
night in some of the hotels was movie night, or they would bring in outside movies. And
Yes.
Friday night again was a show.
Correct.
And help us understand about the clientele. A lot of folks would check in for a period of a week or two or more.
Right.
And the husbands would go back to the city during the week to work.
Yes.
So there was a traffic flow on the weekends on what we now call the Quickway. Once was Old 17, now is Route 17. And
Yes.
you as a bellhop, you had a big day on Friday and Sunday as checkout.
Yes.
Check in and check out.
That's right, Marvin. Friday was the big check-in day. I bellhop Friday, late afternoon, early evening. A lot of tumult, a lot of craziness.
We're talking about possibly 1,000 people or
Yeah.
2,000 people checking in.
That's correct. And then on singles weekends, it was crazy. It was crazy. We had crowds of people there were 3-4 people sharing a room, so the crowds were huge on those singles weekends.
Yeah, and a lot of people, of
Huge.
course, met at the Concorde.
Yes.
Not unlike your folks, but
That's correct.
others that vacationed there and
Yeah.
met and married and
That's-
raised families and what
yes.
have you.
Yes, yes.
So what about the daytime? What was there to do at the hotel in the daytime?
Okay, good question. Daytime, of course, you had swimming in the afternoon. That was very popular.
Indoors and out.
Indoors and out. God, you had golf. You had horseback riding. You had dancing. Of course, dancing was popular. Simon Says,
Right,
another
at the
very,
pools.
very popular activity at
On the
the
patio
hotels.
above the lobby and at the pool, right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah, that's
tennis,
correct.
of
That's
course,
correct. Tennis,
multiple tennis courts.
tennis, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And something I just want to mention about Simon Says, that there was a lot of opinions about Simon Says that Lou Goldstein from Grossinger's had created, invented Simon Says. But there's another side of that story too. There was a gentleman by the name of Lee Berman, who worked at was the activities director at the Concorde, who many say was the creator, inventor of Simon Says. So I just want to throw that out there.
He popularized it anyway, yeah.
Yeah, right. That's correct.
Great.
Yeah.
And what was the most, as a person living and working there, what was the most
Yeah.
exciting thing for you growing up? Besides meeting the acts and so forth.
I think really just meeting the acts, seeing the acts, sometimes having the privilege of meeting the acts face to face, and that's when I was a bellhop, checking them into their rooms, or maybe meeting them backstage. That was really an honor and a privilege. And I also want to say something about my father. He, as a musician working at the Concorde,
What was his name?
Frank Hall,
Mm-hmm.
he used to gather up autographs of all the celebrities for me after their appearances. So I still have an autograph book about 2-3 inches thick of famous celebrities, entertainers, singers, comics. To this day, I still have that book of all their autographs. So that book I cherish
Right.
to this day. I still have it, and
Talk a little bit about our dual life here. When the
Sure.
season ended, although the Concorde was open all year, fairly
Right.
early on as compared to other hotels.
yes,
The Labor Day was the traditional point at which the season ended.
yes,
You went back to a different lifestyle in a small town in
That's right.
a central school district with youngsters from all over neighboring communities that came in by bus.
that's right.
What was that? How shocking to the system was that when the day after Labor Day, almost literally, or 2 days later, you went to school here in Monticello?
Yeah, that was somewhat of a culture shock because throughout the summer you were rubbing elbows with people from New York City and Brooklyn and the 5 boroughs, and really was a different clientele you were interacting with. And then after Labor Day, you go back to school, and then you're back to school with kind of the locals, and they were kind of like in a different, I won't say different class, but
Different culture.
different culture. Exactly, a different culture.
Many of
That's
whom,
it.
of course, also had their families involved in the hotel.
That's
business.
true too.
But then
That's true too.
many were suppliers, business people to the various hotels, whether it was the laundry or the meat market or the linen company or
Right.
supplies or the food supplies. Many of our
Yeah.
those we went to school with whose family were in that business.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
where in the years since that you tell people you grew up in the Catskills, do you get, as I do, everybody has a story about the Catskills? Tells you what they did and which place they went to and what years and so forth?
Yeah. Well, living in Connecticut now, I don't interact with too many people who had gone to the Catskills anymore. But I try to immerse myself in a lot of the books that have been written about the Catskills ever since a lot of the hotels have closed down. And, there's quite a bit of books out there now. If people want to learn more about the Catskills and what it was like, they should find books, and they're out there, these books, and to reminisce a bit.
What was your life here growing up as a student here in Monticello? What activities did you participate in, and ultimately, where'd you go to school, and how did you end up leaving the community?
Good question. I started grammar school in the Rutherford School, then moved on to the middle school, and then moved on to the new Monticello High School, which opened up in 1968. It was a great place to live, to grow up. It was
Sports? Did you play
sport.
sports?
I played a lot of basketball growing up. That was like that was the most popular sport we all played here.
You played on a team?
I actually played for the Jewish Community Center here in Monticello, and I was one of their better players as a senior. When I was a senior in high school, I played on the team, and we played a lot of the Jewish community centers in the area, and we actually reached third place in the state's tournament back in 1972. So, and Carl Silverstein was our coach of that team, who was a prominent attorney here in Monticello,
Yes.
who I'm still very close with to this day.
Carl was the coach when I was on the team as well.
Well,
A few
wow,
years
there
before
you go.
were. Yes.
Okay, wow.
You played Kingston, Newburgh,
That's
Middletown,
correct,
some
Liberty.
of those other places.
That's
Liberty. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
How about what it was like going to the high school basketball games in a small town?
That's a great question. We lived for these games because there were like rivalries. The Monticello Fallsburg high school basketball varsity games were intense basketball games. There was nothing better. There was capacity crowds for these games, and they were played for such intensity. These were really small town school rivals, and these games were as big as any NCAA championship basketball game you'd come across.
To us.
To us local kids. That's how intense and big they were. You didn't want to miss a game.
Right. And,
Yeah.
unlike other big city schools where you'd get on a subway, we had to get on a bus.
That's
It was
right.
An hour to Kingston, an hour to Newburgh,
That's
an hour to Poughkeepsie, just to
correct.
go to play basketball, or
That's right.
sometimes soccer, I guess we play, and
That's
baseball
right.
in the spring. But
That's
you know,
right.
it was pretty spread out as the
That's
rural
it.
community that we lived in.
That's it.
Yeah.
But basketball was king. Speaking about basketball, if I may, we used to look forward to the Kutchers, Marie Stokes basketball game every summer in August, played at Kutchers
Right.
Country Club in August, mid-August, and I wouldn't miss a game. There were such famous NBA basketball players that would come out and play in those games,
Right.
coached by Red Auerbach and maybe someone else, but
Let's set the scene.
yeah,
Maurice Stokes was
Yeah.
a basketball player who fell
yes,
and ended up with encephalitis and was paralyzed. And
right,
Jack Twyman, who became his legal guardian, was
That's
was a
right.
ball player on the team at the
That's
Cincinnati
correct.
At that time.
That's right,
And,
yeah,
he
That's
adopted him and tried to
That's
raise
right.
funds for his medical care.
that's right.
Kutchers, and Mark
Yeah.
Kutcher was sitting in that seat you're in
Okay,
only a week ago. Mark
Wow.
told us that Kutchers decided to sponsor this game as a way of raising funds for Maurice Stokes' health
Right.
benefits.
That's right.
And that's why we had these basketball players from virtually every team in the league would come up, and they would do an exhibition game in the summer.
The great
The
players.
league, of course, would start later in the year,
Yeah.
so we got a chance to glimpse. I remember one year that Dave Cowens came up, and people said, "Who was he?" It turns out to be one of the greatest players that ever played in the game.
Right.
And that was the kind of Bill Russell played, and Oscar Robertson, Wilt Chamberlain.
Will Chamberlain, who was also a bellhop at Kutcher's
Right.
Country Club in the 50s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Came up and was
The tallest bellhop in the Catskills ever.
Exactly. is that famous iconic photo of him
Right.
handing the luggage
There you go. That's
through
the
the window
one.
of the first floor at Kutchers rather than taking
That's
the
the one.
elevator to bring it up. So that was great, because my grandparents had a
Yeah.
hotel down the road from Kutchers, the Delano.
That's
And in
right.
the 50s, we also had a basketball team. And
Oh,
we
okay.
would play against other
Wow,
hotels
how
like
about that?
Kutchers and, of course, Chamberlain. Forget about it. If you ever played against that team, there was no way you could win. But it was a friendly rivalry, and the guests at the hotel had an opportunity after dinner to go out in the basketball courts. Some of them were smooth, some had some lumps. If you knew the familiar bounces, you knew which way to go and how to play.
Yes.
In the 50s, it wasn't exactly hardwood floors.
That's
But it was
right.
great and enjoyable, entertainment, as it were.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes. Seeing the world's top best basketball players converging on one single court for one game in the summer was just magnificent.
And it was played
great.
outdoors.
Outdoors, under the lights.
Yeah, which is a
It was
rarity.
great.
Any
Yeah.
other sports-related folks that you met because they came up to the hotel, Concord? I know, didn't some of the boxers train at Grossinger's and the
Sure,
Concord and
yeah. A
Kutchers?
lot of famous boxers trained here. Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier was a regular at the Concord Hotel, I think. Jerry Cooney
Mhm.
used to train
Floyd
here.
Patterson, I think,
Floyd
was at Grossinger's.
Patterson,
Mhm.
right, right,
Yeah,
right.
everybody was, again, they would work out during the afternoons. And
That's
the guests
it.
would come out of lunch and could watch their workout, watch the sparring and what have you,
That's
and
it.
get autographs as well.
That's
It
it.
was a fascinating and very full lifetime.
That's it. And one thing I'll say about the hotels in this area, as a kid growing up, you really never had to worry about summer work. There was always work at the hotels for you. So finding summer work was never a problem, for a lot of us local kids, with some connections, but
Right. And it wasn't just in the bellhop, being a bellhop. You could be
That's
in the
it.
you could be a busboy or
waiter,
a waiter. You
right?
could be a camp counselor.
That's it.
You could
That's
be in
it.
the
Lifeguard,
office.
yeah,
You could
sure.
Be a lifeguard. You
That's
could be on
it.
the athletic
Or you could-
staff.
Carry clubs as a caddy, sure.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right.
I
That's
remember
right.
well being a caddy at the Concorde. There weren't too many places that had that kind of a golf course that warranted having a caddy.
That's right.
But
That's
did
true.
you ever caddy at the Concorde?
I did. I worked at the golf clubhouse for a summer as a bellhop, but I did a little caddying too on the side. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Here was a hotel with its own golf clubhouse with rooms for golf craze fans,
Right.
guests.
Right.
Amazing.
Let's remind
The
everybody,
enormity of a resort like
Well, it
this
had-
to have their own golf clubhouse.
there were 3 golf courses,
Amazing.
as I recall, at the Concorde. There was the
Right,
International.
that's right.
The
Yeah,
Challenger was a 9-hole course.
that's right.
Was on the hill down towards
That's
the
right,
lake,
yeah.
Kaimisha.
that's right.
And then the famous Monster,
There you go.
which they made very difficult. It got
Yes.
the name Monster because the pros played the first tournament and said, it's too hard for us, we don't want to play there. So it
Right.
became the Monster with huge greens and lots of water, lots of sand, but a wonderful, wonderful challenge. And
That's right.
I find in my travels, wherever I go, if I mention the Concorde, everybody says, have you played the Monster? Because they all know about it. Anybody who's an avid golfer.
Famous golf course. Yeah.
Right. Anything else about hotel life that you can remember that was different than your friends in the city? Or were they envious of you growing up when people would come up and say you actually live here and you work all the time?
Yeah, a little bit, but you take it for granted because it was there and it was a place we'd always go to. It was just there, so we almost took it for granted, like it was our lifestyle, a part of our lives. Our family worked there, and we go there from time to time. So
Tell us about what it was like to walk through the promenade, if you will, of stores at the Concorde. I mean, it was large enough that it was almost like a city.
yeah.
What were the
Yeah.
stores? Do you remember?
Great question.
inside?
Sure. The sundry shop.
Right.
There were clothing stores.
Right.
There was a rug store.
Mhm.
And incidentally, I worked at this rug store during rug auctions on
Carpets,
Saturday
like Persian
nights,
carpets.
holding up these very, very heavy rugs for $15 a night after 3 hours of hard labor. It was rough, but I endured it. Back to the stores, there was a barber shop
Right, and a beauty salon.
where I got my first haircut. The name of the barbershop owner was Michael.
Yes.
His assistant was Arthur, who gave me my first haircut. He's still in town here in Monticello. He's in his 80s. I go to say hello to him from time to time. Great man. There was a dance studio, famous dance studio, as part of the shops there.
Art gallery.
At the time when the Latin American music was popular in the 50s, that was a very popular dance studio. I forget the name of the famous dancers who ran the studio, but it was a very busy dance studio.
Right.
A beauty shop, the coffee shop.
Let's talk about the coffee shop.
Okay.
If you get three
Let's do
meals
it.
a day, you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What do you need a coffee shop?
You're still
for?
hungry
People are actually still eating.
after the nightclub, the nightclub after the show at night.
The show
People would
began
march
at
to
10, right? As I recall,
start at
dinner
10,
started at
10:30
7,
officially.
10 or 10:30. It
Right.
would be over at least midnight or thereafter.
11:30, 12 o'clock.
people would then go to the coffee
march
shop.
to the coffee shop for another meal, a fourth meal of the day,
A bagel and cream cheese.
a bagel
or
and a
something.
schmear.
Right, or a muffin, or some coffee cake, or what have you.
Yeah.
Tea.
Yeah,
Amazing. And then in the morning, it
Amazing.
would start all over again.
start all over again in the morning. Yeah, I mean, the meals were huge. Let's face it. You ordered one thing and they bring you 10 things to your table. You could order one of each from the menu. There
Right.
was no limit to the food.
Right, and
At
let's
all,
remind
no
our
limit.
listeners that
Yeah.
this was a fixed price for the week.
Correct.
Or the weekend. So when
Correct.
you paid to check in, you paid for
check in.
nothing separately, not for the food, not for the
Right.
swimming, not for the tennis, not for the
That's it.
golf. Well, golf, maybe there might have been a fee, but
Right.
almost everything was included
That's
in
it.
this one price
That's
for
it.
the entire week.
Yeah.
And how about the kids? Tell us what happened. What were the guest children? Didn't they have a daycare set up for them?
They did. They had camps, they had counselors, they had activities for the kids. Always.
Right.
Always. Yeah. Everybody was kept busy. There was something for everybody. Okay?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the scopes were also something very popular too. During the day, photographers would run around and take pictures of the guests throughout the evening or at their tables at dinner time. And the next morning, on Sunday mornings, there was a little photo studio. And overnight, they had made up all these little scopes of the guests. And the guests would come by if they're interested and purchase the little scopes of themselves.
For $1.
Is that it?
I think it was
Okay.
$1.
Okay.
So they'd view these through the light. You'd have to hold
That's
them up
it.
to the light
Exactly.
to see them.
Exactly.
They were an
Yeah.
actual color photo.
That's it.
And
That's sort of like a remembrance of your time at the
it
Concorde.
said Concorde on the side.
That's
or
it.
Kutchers or whatever the case may
You
be.
remember? Yeah.
And the photographers would stay up all night punching all these little photos out and putting them in these little scopes, as you call them. So
That's
everybody
it.
had used
That's
them as a
it.
keychain.
And they had a card room also where a lot of the men would get together and play some pretty intense card games at night.
Right. And a
These were
mahjong.
smoke-filled rooms, mind you, and they drew crowds. They drew an audience. These card games because there was a lot of money here at stake. There was also a Mrs. J's dining room upstairs. Tea room, Mrs. J's tea room. Do you recall her tea room, her
I
own
don't-
private tea
I
room?
recall the tea room on the Jewish holidays. When
Okay,
they didn't have
sure.
a paid, because of the
Right.
holiday observance, they didn't have a coffee shop.
Right.
So they would put a tea room in so people have an
Yeah.
opportunity to have tea and coffee after the show without
That's
having to carry
right.
money or to pay extra for that. Actually, you did pay extra for the coffee shop.
That's right. And they had a little, well, let's call it, if you need your suits pressed, they had a gentleman to press your suits there. And they also had an artist named Lazar who designed or created caricatures of guests for $7 a caricature. Very talented man. He did several of me. They also had a portrait artist. I forget his name. A very talented man.
Yes.
Maybe
And
you recall
I don't
him.
recall his name
Yeah.
at the moment, but I do recall that the shop had beautiful portraits
Yes.
on display.
Yes, he was
Nice.
next to a jewelry counter also.
Yes, that was on the landing up
That's
above
it.
the lobby.
That's
as I
it.
recall, both
That's
the
it.
jewelry. I think Tunick was the photographer.
Tunic, yeah, that's it, Earl Tunic.
Earl Tunick
Right,
was
there
the
you go.
photographer. I remember that.
There you go. There you go.
What
There you
about lectures? Weren't there lectures and, out on the terrace for people to go listen to from various topics and speakers and so on?
There might have been. I wasn't really much a part of that.
They did have auctions, though. You mentioned that.
They had
Art
auctions, yeah. They had a art auction. Morris Katz, the famous painter who'd paint pictures instantly before your eyes within minutes.
Right,
Yeah, he was a quick brush stroke artist.
right.
Morris Katz, very famous. Yeah, popular
Yes.
artist.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
People would bring home a lot of memorabilia.
They would. They
Yeah.
would. They would. Yeah. Yeah.
What about the winters when it was less busy? What was it, more weekend business?
For the most part, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The hotels the Concorde was open 7 days a week, of course, but during the weeks, kind of quiet. Weekends were busier. Always things to do, though. Always things to do. But the summertime was the excitement, the time that was so exciting in the summer times.
Were friends of yours here in Monticello growing up? Did they have Sweet 16s at hotels as they did in my day?
Actually,
Or mitzvahs at
I
hotels?
had my bar mitzvah at the Concord Hotel. Very few of us had a bar mitzvah celebration there because it was rather expensive.
Mhm.
But because of my mother's connection with Gordon Winarick, he was kind enough to sponsor a bar mitzvah for me, a cocktail party, a dinner, and then afterwards we all made it to the nightclub for the show.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So I was really one of the lucky ones.
Great.
In fact, I'm here today because it's been 49 years since my bar mitzvah at Temple Shalom. So I'm sort of celebrating that today. Yeah, it's a remembrance for me.
Mazel tov.
Walking down memory lane. Thank
Right.
you.
Great. Any other, as we're winding down
Yes.
a little bit here,
Yes.
are there any other stories or anecdotes or remembrances that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just want to say it was a wonderful place to grow up, and you don't appreciate a place like this until after you leave it for so many years, and you look back and you say to myself, my God, this was an amazing place to grow up and meet like world-class entertainers, celebrities, the Concorde afforded so many people opportunities, whether it be work or what have you. And, thank God it was here, and the other hotels were around in the area because it just gave us so much to do, and it lent so much vitality to the whole area, to the Borscht Belt.
Kevin, thank you.
My pleasure.
You've helped paint
Thank
a
you.
word picture for our listeners
I
about
hope
what it was
I
like growing
did,
up
Marvin.
in the Catskills and
Yeah.
the Borscht Belt. A reminder, we're talking to Kevin Hall, who
Thank
grew
you.
up here in Monticello and
Yeah.
whose mom and dad both worked at the Concord Hotel,
Yeah.
which is one of the preeminent hotels here over
Yeah.
the years. And we're doing this recording as part of a StoryCorps program, which we will be supplying our reminiscences to the Library of Congress so others can check them out and listen and share and remember as well. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Marvin. It's been a pleasure.
Great.